first paper is from Scholar Studek, who many people know. Two interesting things you might know about Scholar Studek is that he is a passionate fan of Stanford University. You can speak to him, I'm sure, for hours on end about why Stanford is the finest university of the world. And also, I think he probably could outpace anybody on the harbour in a 14-foot, is that?
Yes.
In a 14-foot I don't know if that's how he got up, but Scholar Studek does. So he's going to speak this afternoon on good government, freedom, democracy, and the case of Edward Snowden. And after his presentation, we'll be time for questions, and then we'll have some time to discuss some of the ideas raised in groups. So we make Scholar Studek very welcome.
Thanks, Mr. Chilton. Good afternoon. At last year's meeting, I spoke to you about the failures of a democracy from a representational standpoint. And today I'm going to continue on this theme, but with a more specific example, the NSA. So I thought we'd start with a simple question. What form of government has the most power? There are many systems to consider, but I think it's easiest if we could just compare a democracy to a dictatorship. So the question is, does the single ruler in a dictatorship have more power than the rulers of a democracy? We naturally think of the worst case scenario, and of course some real life examples, which would seem to make the answer obvious. However, both systems enact laws, and both systems enforce laws. Clearly, the decrees from a tyrannical dictator will be different from the decrees of an elected Congress, or at least we hope. It's also fair to hope that the laws of a democracy will be enforced in a more even-handed way than some of the bloodshed we see from some dictators. But the differences between a democracy and a dictatorship are rather not the ability to make or enforce laws, but the brutality or lack thereof of the laws themselves. It's only the degree of evilness or benevolence of the rulers that determines a ruling party's sort of badness or goodness. As another demonstration, let's ask a question. Which people have been the most ruled over? Kim Jong-un's North Koreans, Saddam Hussein's Iraqis, Hitler's Germans, Obama's Americans. Notice few, the first few are all horrible leaders with oppressive regimes, particularly that last one, I just hate that. But are Americans, or Australians for that matter, less governed? Less threatened, less imprisoned, less tortured, sure, but less ruled? Probably not. The difference is simply the benevolence of the rulers. So with a simple example, we can clearly see that it's not necessarily the system of government which determines who has the most power, but rather it's the rulers themselves who determine who has the most power. In our democratic society, we must always add the phrase, with the consent of the ruled. After all, a democracy has a mechanism for discharging those we, the people, don't agree with and don't want to be ruled by. While this works for Australia and the US, though, there are other democracies, or so-called democracies at least, around the world, where the ability to make change is much less clear. In these places, the democracy rules with an iron fist, and the people suffer under their rule in the same way people suffer under dictators. The system of rule has the potential to run rampant. We now come to the pivotal question. Regardless of the form it takes, when is government good and when is it bad? Now, if you're Thomas Jefferson or Henry David Thoreau, the answer to what is bad government is clear. In the words of Thomas Jefferson, my reading of history convinces me that most bad government results from too much government. And similarly, Thoreau thought that government is best which governs least. We could call this the small L, liberal school of government. However, the terms too much and least in this context are very unclear. What is too much? How much is least? What crosses the line? For example, does jaywalking really need to be illegal? Sure, it's dangerous to walk across the road, but who's really in danger? It's only the wrongdoer who's going to get hurt. So what's the real crime? Similarly, should government dictate and tax street parking? Have they gone too far in determining the rules of this society? Other than the inconvenience I place on others who are trying to do the same, why can't I park in Rose Bay for 30 minutes? And while that law may seem to reach a little too far, how about a few in the US I was able to dig up? These are all laws still in the books, keep in mind. In Oregon, a car door may not be open longer than necessary. I noticed there's no definition on the word longer than necessary. In Denver, dog catchers must notify dogs 3 days in advance before catching them. Signs must be posted where visible to dogs. But there's no word on what language to use, of course. Condoms may not be sold in vending machines in Maryland, except in places where alcohol is sold. I think that's an interesting mixture, but I'll let you think about that. Bear selling is also illegal in Alabama, but I didn't even know that was a thing, so that's pretty ridiculous. Apparently fashion is also not subject to choice in Ohio. There, women are not allowed to wear paint and leather shoes. However, there is good news for those in West Virginia. Roadkill may be taken home for food. And this may sound the most wacky, I think, but Google, developing the first mass market driverless car, may soon make this California more relevant. No vehicle without a driver may exceed 50 miles per hour. Now, I didn't bother researching why this law was created or who created it, but they obviously must have a time machine considering the technology is very recent. And in case you're a hunter in Tennessee, you should know that you cannot shoot game from a moving vehicle, except webs. But for those of you that don't know, Tennessee is landlocked, so I'm not sure how you can do that. You have to be a hell of a good shot. While those laws may redefine stupidity and overreach, I think this last one, it really embodies the over-governance of some governments. I'm thankful that I don't live in Connecticut for this law, really, because it says that in this forward-thinking state, 16-year-old boys may be put to death for disobeying, striking, or cursing their parents. And I think that's appropriate for this community today. A bit of fun, and clearly laws which are not enforced, but nonetheless an example of governments over-governing. Followers of Abraham Lincoln will quickly recognize and agree with his view of the role of government in his famous Gettysburg Address. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now, the previous laws were written by a government of the people, written by the people, but definitely not for the people. These are simplistic laws which probably had meaning to those who wrote them, but obviously seem to be examples of Jefferson's and Thoreau's aversion to over-governance. Now, what about more complex laws, though? We can understand the laws prohibiting jaywalking or limited parking. They're there to protect those who need protecting and to provide fairness and courtesy for those who would say otherwise, if not an easy way for council to make a buck for us. But let's use jaywalking as an example. As a society, we prefer not to spend taxpayer money to have ambulance running all over the city, picking up those who have been injured in car crashes because they've tried to run out in the street during rush hour. Therefore, we as a society allow our governors to enact a law which prohibits us from endangering ourselves. Rather than have pedestrians share the road with cars, as we all know we would want to, we ban the practice so as not to litter the roads with the injured and the dead. A perfectly reasonable application of the rules, but let's be clear about what we have actually done here. We have agreed to give up a bit of our freedom, our right to walk wherever we want, for the betterment of our society, i.e. dead bodies aren't everywhere. Using this logic as a template, of course, we can quickly create many other laws. For example, clearly we should have maximum speed limits of 20 kilometers per hour. 50 is too fast and 120 is just suicide. All contact sports should obviously be banned as well. We've all seen the main sportsman who can barely walk anymore. He needs our protection. And to save our ears, loud music has got to go. Headphones, gone. And we may as well bin the iPhone while we're at it. That's got death written all over it. Also, why would anyone want to swim? That's a death trap. There are waves, riptides, sharks. Swimming has to go. And of course, tall ladders is the most obvious. That's just suicide. So again, it's still a bit of a joke, but you can quickly go from good ideas to bad in the name of protecting the government. So now let's get serious. How about national security? In the age of terrorism, global travel, and constant conflict, what are we prepared to do for the sake of our security? What freedoms will we forego in order to protect ourselves? Further still, like jaywalking laws, what freedoms must our governors mandate we forego in order to protect ourselves? This question is the one the world is struggling with to answer, given the classified documents American computer specialist Edward Snowden leaked to The Guardian last year, which detail the National Security Agency's snooping capabilities. The arguments for and against surveillance are complex, of course, and both sides of the argument must agree that there's a clear trade-off. On the one hand, the ability to read through private conversations through email, phone, or other types of communications could prevent terrorist attacks and save innocent lives. But on the other hand, the US now has the capability to monitor and track anyone it deems necessary, and has the opportunity to exploit that information. Who they choose to monitor and track is determined solely by those with power. The people, those they represent, and we, really have no say in this. The government are left out of the discussion by the government. So when does a good thing, saving innocent lives, turn into a bad thing, the unfettered ability to snoop on us? Now, to have the ability to save a life, the argument goes, the free must give up a bit of their freedom. Like jaywalking, we can't all walk around in cars all the time. To catch a terrorist, all of us must be monitored. All of us are potential terrorists, and all of us are suspicious. But is this the same thing as the jaywalking example? Is the freedom we're giving up too steep a price for the ability that we're receiving in return? Have our governors reached too far? Perhaps a simple question can help us find the answer. That is, how many lives must be saved to justify this loss of freedom? 1 person, 10, 100, 1,000, 1 million, 10 million? What if a madman were able to exterminate every person on Earth? Would we give up a bit of freedom for this? Well, I think the answer is obvious, yes. But the real answer probably lies at a lower number. For some, giving up all their freedom would be worth saving just one person, whereas for others, it would have to be multiples of this before any freedom would be relinquished. So as the saying goes, freedom isn't free, but is there a responsibility to govern responsibly? And if there is, and I believe there is, how do people express and enforce responsibility on those who are our governors? I believe it is by the brave acts of people like Edward Snowden. He has risked everything: his citizenship, his freedom, his life in the belief that the US has overstepped its responsibility to govern responsibly. He has shed light on what was formerly a dark and secret society working among us and supposedly on our behalf. Our privacy and our freedom has been taken, and too much of it, without our consent. So we have elected our representatives to govern on our behalf, but in this case they have chosen to act on our behalf in secrecy. The government is, in effect, governing without the consent of the governed. We are being spied on and treated with suspicion as if we are all criminals, or potential criminals at least. The government has the ability to snoop on us individually and collectively. While only a small fraction of Snowden's documents have been released, we have seen evidence of the US and Australia spying on its friends. In the context of the greater good, what purpose does this serve? And the more important question to ask is, in the fight for the moral high ground, is Edward Snowden a traitor or a hero? Now returning to the original question, irrespective of the form, when is government good and when is it bad? While I believe a democracy of the people, by the people, and for the people is the best form of government, there can be few safeguards when power is secretly usurped by those in power. The only safeguard to excessive use of power is a strong, loud, and engaged public willing to fight those who would take freedom from us. It is in this vein that Snowden will be remembered. Unfortunately, though, he will probably be remembered as a traitor. In my view, though, Snowden is a hero, and we can only hope that he, his brave actions, and his documents will be able to stop a democracy gone bad before the damage is too great. Now, the questions that I have asked today are not new. Only the circumstances are. Power and systems of government have been pondered and debated for centuries. As Plato said, the heaviest penalty for declining to rule is to be ruled by someone inferior to yourself. Winston Churchill famously quipped, "It has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except all the others that have already been tried." But he also said that the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. American revolutionary Thomas Paine similarly thought that government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil, in its worst state, an intolerable one. In more recent times, comedian turned political commentator Bill Maher said that freedom isn't free. It shouldn't be a bragging point that, oh, I don't get involved in politics, as if that makes you somehow clean. No, that makes you a derelict of duty in a republic. Liars and panderers in government would have a much harder time of it if people didn't insist on their right to continually remain ignorant and blindly agreeable. But maybe Edward R. Morrow said it best. A nation of sheep will beget a government of wolves. So the questions that we have to ask now are, is the US a nation of sheep? Have the wolves taken control? Now, while I hope not, it certainly seems like we have opened the door, placed the lamb chop on the kitchen floor, and invited the wolf to come in and take